Okay, here's the final part to this video on the practice test for tomorrow's chapter 4. So we are going to continue with number 9, and for this problem all they want us to do is to get y by itself. That's what they mean by solve for y. So first we're going to subtract 5 to both sides. And we end up with this. The next thing is I want to undo that negative, so that's the same thing really as saying negative 1 times this expression here. So I'm going to divide by negative 1. And what this is going to do, when I divide negative 1 from this expression, it's going to make this negative 3x, and then it's going to make this positive 5. So it's like saying 3x divided by negative 1, that's negative 3x. Negative 5 divided by negative 1, that's positive 5. The last thing to do here is to add 3 to both sides. So we end up with y equals negative 3x plus 8. And that's it. That's what they wanted you to do. For number 10, same thing. We want to solve for y, so get y by itself. So we want to square this side, square this side. That's going to leave us with 4. Y minus 4 equals x plus 1 squared, and then add 4 to both sides. So y equals x plus 1 squared plus 4, and now we've solved for y. You don't want to apply this exponent of 2 or square or anything because they're not asking us to do anything else except solve for y, which we've already done. So you don't really need to do anything else. There's our answer for number 10. Number 11, for this one, same thing, solve the equation for y. Now, this right here doesn't have any y in it, so I don't have to worry about trying to undo anything here. The only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract the whole thing. So I'm going to subtract this whole group being squared from both sides. So I'm going to get y minus 1 equals 10 minus x minus 4 squared. So when I subtract this whole group from itself, then it's going to become 0. Now the next thing is I want to square root both sides. So I'm going to end up canceling out the square and the square root, so I'm going to be left over with y minus 1. And on this side, I'm just going to leave it alone. I'm not concerned with doing anything because all they want us to do is get y by itself. The last thing to do is add 1 to both sides. So I'm going to end up with y equals the square root of 10 minus x minus 4 squared plus 1. There you go. So our answer is this expression, this equation right here. And just leave everything like that. This is all we care about, getting y by itself. Alright, let's go on to number 12. So this is a little bit of a review from previous chapter. Simplify the expression below, express your answer as simply as possible. So when we're adding fractions, we need to make sure that the denominators are the same. Here they already are the same, so we can just add the two fractions. Now when you add fractions, the denominator is just written once. Don't add the two denominators together. The numerators, we do add them. So we're going to get 9m plus 27. That's what we get when we add these two numerators. Now here, I notice that I can factor out 9 from this expression up here. I can divide out 9. So if I factor out 9, I'm going to end up with 9 times m plus 3. On the bottom, I really have m plus 3 times 1. That's really the same thing as m plus 3. The only reason I wrote this is so that I can see that m plus 3 are going to cancel. And this is equal to 9 over 1, which is equal to 9. So there you go, we've simplified. So this whole thing up here actually ends up just becoming 9. Doesn't matter that we have m's right there. No matter what value you plug into m, we're always just going to get 9. Let's go on to 13. For 13, we're subtracting. Same idea as addition. We want to make sure that we have a common denominator, which we do. So that makes it easier for us. So all I need to worry about is adding my numerators. So I'm just going to get 3, actually not adding, but subtracting. You got to be careful when you subtract because it applies to every single term. So it's going to be 3a squared plus a minus 1. That's just my first numerator. Minus 2a squared minus negative a. When you minus negative a, it's going to turn into a positive. So it's going to be positive a. Minus positive 2, that's going to end up being minus 2. Alright, so that's what I mean by applying this minus to every single term. Notice that the symbols, the signs changed. And on the denominator, we only need to write the denominator once. So it's going to be a squared minus 2a plus 1. Now the next thing you want to do is you want to combine like terms up here in the numerator. So it's going to be 3a squared minus 2a squared, that's a squared. A plus a, that's 2a. Negative 1 minus 2, that's negative 3. And the last thing is you want to factor these two. Factor the numerator, factor the denominator to see if anything cancels. We can't cancel anything right here because we're adding and subtracting all over the place. So let's factor the numerator first. So the numerator is going to factor 2 to positive a plus 3 and a minus 1. And that'll leave us with this over here, so that works. So this one factors to a plus 3, a minus 1. The bottom, we got to factor that one too, so it's going to be a times a, negative 1 and negative 1. So notice that negative 1 times negative 1 gives you positive 1, and negative a plus negative a gives you negative 2a. So on the bottom we get a minus 1, a minus 1. So now we can see that these two cancel, and we get a plus 3 over a minus 1. So that's the reason why we want to factor, because now we can tell that we can simplify it. Over here we can't simplify it this way. Last one. So for number 14, we are going to multiply. So when we multiply, we don't care if the denominators are not the same, because we're going to multiply across. So for this problem right here, multiply the numerators across. So we're going to get x minus 2 squared times 2 times x minus 7. Now don't multiply anything out yet. Just leave it like this because this is actually in factored form. So you'll be able to tell if anything cancels. The bottom, let's multiply across as well. 2x minus 14 times x minus 2. Now here's where I can kind of start looking at some stuff, see if anything's going to cancel. This 2, we can actually distribute it. Go ahead and multiply it times this x minus 7. And this x minus 2 squared, we can rewrite it as x minus 2 times x minus 2. So we're going to write it as x minus 2, x minus 2. That's really what x minus 2 squared is. It just means that it's being multiplied times itself. And I'm going to distribute this 2 times each of these. So I'm going to get 2x minus 14. Alright, so the reason I did that with the numerator is so that I can see what's going to cancel on the bottom. The bottom, I'm going to leave it alone. So don't do anything to the denominator. Now you can see that this cancels out with this, and this one cancels out with this one. So we end up with x minus 2 over, really there's a 1 right here. Notice that if you multiply by 1, it doesn't really change anything, but that way you know what's left over. X minus 2 over 1, that simplifies to x minus 2. So there's our answer. The answer is x minus 2. Alright, so that's number 14, and that's the end of our video.